And I'm live as well.
Alrighty, well, thanks again for showing up, everybody. We're here to talk about the state of Ethereum. Past couple weeks, there's been a lot of information going around, and I'm hoping that we can get some clarification this evening so that we can clear a number of questions up. To start out, I will say, at least on my channel, if there is anybody listening on my channel that decides that they don't like the way Ethereum's running and they're going to ramble on about that, you will be banned. So Tim was nice enough to join us to give us information that we are looking for. We may not be happy about the move to proof of stake, but it's reality, and we all need to work towards our goals, given that is already happening. So with that said, again, thanks, Tim. I appreciate you joining us. Along with Tim Beiko, we also have Blind Run from Son of a Tech. We have Vega Serpent Special Forces, as well as Red Panda. We might get BBT to join us later on. I know that he was at a conference, so I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to join us or not.
Yeah, he's at the Miner Summit, I believe, right?
Yep, exactly. So, Tim, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, what your history is with just cryptocurrency in general, as well as your current role with Ethereum.
Sure. Easier to start from what I do now. So right now, I work with the Ethereum Foundation. I run what's called the All Core Devs meetings. Those are the calls every 2 weeks where the different developers working on the Ethereum protocol get together, discuss potential changes to the protocol, and I basically facilitate those calls. And then large part of my role is then communicating back out to the community, kind of what gets decided there and whatnot. So that's part of why I'm here tonight. Prior to doing that, I spent 2.5 years working on one of the actual protocol teams. So I was a product manager there, not a developer, but basically, helped with the roadmap. We built the Hyperledger Besu, which is one of the 4 clients on Ethereum right now. Prior to that, had a background in product management. I have a very small amount of experience mining myself. So I mined Monero lots of years ago when you could do that on AWS with some free startup credits. So I don't have like a great I've never run a mining business myself, but like I've run several mining instances. I've implemented mining support in an Ethereum client. So I have a general idea of how it works.
Okay, good. Thank you. Can you also talk a little bit about you said the All Core Devs meeting, you guys have calls on that. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other calls that might be of interest as well that happened during a month?
Sure. So, All Core Devs is kind of the biggest one for me because it's really where it's the most important that everybody agrees together. And the reason for that is when we make changes to the Ethereum protocol that involve consensus rules, everybody needs to implement them at the exact same time. And it's what we call hard forks or network upgrades, right? So, this is really where I spend the bulk of my time, making sure everybody's aligned there, that, and most importantly, that, we maintain the security of the network while we do these changes. These changes obviously affect a bunch of different stakeholders in the ecosystem. So, with this upcoming upgrade London, we're changing the way transactions are formatted and whatnot. So all of basically every tool that sends transactions is going to have to eventually update. So we've had a lot of calls in the past with them because, we're also changing how fee estimation works. A lot of the tools like ETH gas station and whatnot will also need to do those updates. So we have calls with kind of projects building on Ethereum as well. Yeah, I'd say those are really the bulk of it. There might be, there's a bunch of ad hoc ones, but the core developers and then just calls with various projects.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So kind of going straight into what you just talked about with 1559, I'm curious, before we get into more specific questions about it, why are gas prices so low right now?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of things right, there's a lot of things that influence gas prices, right? One of the biggest one that we saw in the past year was basically, they call them PGAs, so private gas auctions, which is bots competing for arbitrage opportunities in the mempool. And in the past year, and just in case people are not aware, arbitrage opportunity, the simplest way to think about it is imagine you put in a trade on Uniswap, somebody sees the trade, they see you're willing to accept a 2% slippage on your trade. So there's a bot that'll look at that, they'll front run you, execute a trade right before you, push the price up, and then sell right after you, push the price back down. So they've kind of exploited or arbitraged your trade. And because of how Ethereum is made, when you set a transaction in a transaction pool, everybody sees it. So all the bots also see it. And earlier this year, call it like the first half of this year, a lot of these auctions would happen directly in the transaction pool. So that means, imagine, you send a trade to Uniswap for like a $10,000 swap or something, and you put a 2% slippage fee. So that's like a $200 arbitrage, right? And what would happen is bots would compete directly in the transaction pool, and you basically have an incentive to up your gas price all the way up to like $199, right? Because then you're still making $1 profit. And what would happen when those transactions when those arbitrage transactions were all competing in the transaction pool is not only would like the one that arbitrages the transaction get on chain, but all of the failed ones, right? Like all of the failed bots would also get on chain. And so that would take up a ton of block space. And obviously it means less block space for everybody else on the network. So that kind of artificially raises the gas prices. Over the past 3-4 months, there's a project called Flashbots that's been working to help make it, help the people who want to engage in those auctions for arbitrage compete mostly off-chain. And this has had like two nice properties. The first is that the Flashbot teams, which I think 85% of mining hash rate on Ethereum use now, so it allows more people to be able to participate in like that revenue opportunity. Whereas before it was just like the biggest miners that could kind of develop those strategies, or people who had connections directly to miners. Flashbot is all open source, so anybody can kind of run it. And so that means you can, get, if you mine a block, it includes one of those arbitrage transactions. Obviously, miners get a nice payout on that. But the other thing that's really valuable with Flashbots is that it makes those auctions not happen in the public transaction pool. It all happens on the Flashbot, kind of call it like a different transaction pool, which means only the winning arbitrage gets on chain. So both for arbitragers, this is much better because they don't pay if they don't kind of win their arbitrage. But then for everybody else using the network, it means only the transactions that actually successfully arbitrage something get included, and all the other ones never make it into a block, which creates much more block space for regular people's transactions, driving the gas prices down. I think, the other thing you've seen is like with DeFi summer and DeFi just in general over the past year, there's a lot of like incentivization that's been going on. And, I don't follow it super closely, but obviously if DeFi protocols pay people to like yield farm or stuff like that, they're basically subsidizing transactions. And if that stops, or if, even just if the price of, DeFi tokens go down, the dollar amount of subsidy goes down. So that means the gas prices would also fall. So I think those are all kind of like secondary reasons, but the main one, at least that I would say, like I'm not an expert at this, but it's definitely moving the arbitrage transactions separately, having them be more efficient and leaving more block space for everybody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Red Panda. You can ask your questions.
Okay, Tim, thanks for coming on. I have a first question about just regarding, we'll talk about EIP 1559. Is there any difference between inclusion fee and versus miner tip?
No, so they're all kind of the same. Yeah, we've changed the terms over and over. People argued about them, but just to be clear, whether you hear inclusion fee, priority fee, or tip, those are all equivalent. Yeah.
They're all the same. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Next question: what is like the estimated inclusion fee then?
So that's hard, right? Yeah. So there, like there's two things you kind of need to, or two classes of transactions, right? You want to think about. One is just your regular user, like sending a transaction, and two are these high-paying arbitrage transactions, right? If you look at these high-paying arbitrage transactions, you can assume basically 100% of the transaction fees from that will go into the miner tip, because these people are basically saying, I want to pay a miner a lot of money so that they include my transaction first in the block. Right, the people are not competing just for inclusion in the block; they're competing for first inclusion in the block. If you look at those, let me just pull it up. Flashbots has like a dashboard. Yeah, they have a dashboard. I don't know if I can share the link somewhere in the chat for people to see it. I'll share it in this group chat, and I'll let you all kind of propagate it.
Sure. Yeah. Spread it out.
Yeah. So basically, if you look at this, sorry, it's still loading on my thing. It shows you how much basically ETH was generated by just like these arbitrage transactions, and MEV miner income.
Is that the dashboard.flashbots.net?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dashboard or explore.flashbots.net?
That's what I'm trying to find. I think it's
dashboard.
dashboard,
I'm on Explore.
actually. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I think that's the wrong one.
Which one is it then?
I think dashboard is the right one. Yeah. Sorry,
okay.
said.
Okay, yeah.
Explore.flashbots.net too.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the one in chat's correct, guys. Sorry, just want to make
Yeah.
sure they know.
Yeah. Okay, so it kind of shows me the total profit, but that's not a super useful figure, right? It shows me 48,000 ETH, but it doesn't tell me how long ago that that was. Anyways, they have data about this, but I think last time I checked, it's something like, I think 60% of blocks have a bundle right now, and those bundles will have I think it's something between like 0.1 and 0.3 ETH extra on average. So it obviously depends about how much opportunity there is for arbitrage on chain, but I suspect that somewhere between like 10 and 50% of the block reward is probably like a decent estimate for like how much extra revenue can be generated by miner extractable value. So that's kind of a lower bound, but there's also two other things that are worth considering. The first is every transaction also needs to put in a small tip. And the reason for that is if transactions didn't put a tip at all, then why would miner even like mine blocks with transactions, right? You would just basically mine empty blocks, get the block reward, and you save on cost because you don't even need to run a node anymore. Every transaction will probably put in a small tip. And the way we calculate what's like the fair kind of market value for that is every time you add an extra transaction in your block, you're slightly increasing the odds of being uncalled, right? Because your block will take longer to be propagated on the network. And so we can kind of track over time as we increase the block limit on the network, what does that do to the uncle rate, right? Like when the block limit goes from 12.5 to 14.5 million, how much more uncles do we see? And that gives us like a rough proxy for like how much each like unit of gas added in a block like increases your risk of being an uncle. And then you can kind of go backwards from that and say, well, like what's the right price that you should charge for gas if you want to neglect, the risk, if you want to like offset the risk of uncle. And right now, last time I did the math, it was roughly 2 gwei per gas. So I think at a minimum, all the defaults should be at about like 2 gwei per gas per transaction. So this is just people sending regular transactions as kind of a floor. And then the third time where like there's going to be extra transaction revenue is under 1559. We basically double the possible block space. So we go from a maximum of 14 million or 15 million to a maximum of 30 million. And if there's times where there's more demand than 30 million gas at a certain base fee, which is the minimum, the part of the transaction fee that gets burnt, people are going to start competing on the tip because we'll be back to the system kind of like we have today, right? Where now the blocks are always full, so people have to outbid each other on the gas price in order to get in. So in like the short periods where you're going to have blocks, that have a ton of transactions, and think like times of high volatility, right? Like if the price of Ether crashes and everybody's trying to like save their CDP or their collateralized position, people will start outbidding each other. Similarly, the price of Ether goes up super quick, so people want to all go margin long. They'll all start outbidding each other. Or just, random things like, Uniswap drops a governance token. Everybody wants to go claim their governance token right now, something like that. So in those cases, you'll see people kind of outbidding each other because they want their transaction to be executed super quickly. So that's another case where, miner revenue will still be quite high. This is all very kind of hand wavy. Unfortunately, we don't have like clear numbers. And the hard part is you're taking one value that exists today, the gas price, and splitting it into two, right? Like the tip and the base fee. And we only have like rough estimates to say what falls in which bucket.
Right. Okay, great. I guess you already answered the will MEV be affected by 1559? That was my next question. So that's good. The next one, will rewards per block be affected by 1559 given where the gas prices are? Okay.
No.
Okay, good.
Sorry. Yeah, the only thing I would add there is, the reward is going to say 2 ETH per block. If we did not have the London hard fork this summer, the difficulty bomb is going to go off. So, if we don't hard fork like this summer, what happens is the reward stays the same, but the blocks kind of become farther and farther apart. So we're going to reset the bomb in London. So we're going to keep kind of the same schedule, and we won't be in a spot where like the blocks start being delayed more than 13 seconds.
Right, exactly. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Is there anything else included in London besides the difficulty bomb delay and 1559?
Oh yeah. I wanted to keep this scope small, but this is hard to do. Let me just pull up the list so I make sure I don't miss anything. I think there's 5 or 6 EIPs. Pretty sure there's 5. Yeah. So there's EIP 1559. There's one EIP 3198. It's just like a kind of a sister EIP to 1559. It just returns the base fee opcode. So if smart contracts want to query what the base fee is, they'll be able to do it. Minor change. The biggest other change in London is EIP 3529. And what this does is it reduces gas refunds for certain cases. And the reason for that is gas refunds are bad for, gas refunds were originally intended for smart contract developers to kind of have good, call it like state hygiene, where if they delete data, they would get a small refund. So that's like good for the blockchain that they delete data. And we kind of thought when we introduced this, it would lead to that. What it's led to in practice is 2 kind of bad things. The first is gas tokens. So what happens is when the gas prices go low, people will just create a bunch of transactions to fill out the Ethereum network with just junk data, so that when the gas prices are high, they can get a refund for the gas that they spent and then pay like this gas pay this lower gas cost. And that just creates a lot of instability in the network. So 3529 will help curb that. And the other thing that it'll help with is right now, gas, when you get a refund as part of your transactions execution, half of that is credited in like extra execution. So there's like this weird rule where if you have like a block that's 14 million gas and you like executed refunds the whole way, you would actually get half of that back. So you get another 7 million gas that you could execute in that block. And that means that our blocks on mainnet right now are not like the same actual size, even though, they all say 15 million gas. Depending on how many refunds, they may vary in how long they take to execute. And the challenge with that is that it makes it much harder to raise the gas limit because we're not really, when we raise the gas limit, we really need to focus on what's like the worst case that can happen, not just the average block that we see. So it's almost like if right now our gas limit is 15 million, but with the refunds, our gas limit is actually something like 22.5 or something, 23.5 million. So this will help. I think we reduce this refund from like half the extra execution to 1/5. So it'll just help bound the execution block size a bit smaller. And and just make it easier to, if we want to have more block size increases in the future, we can reason about them, with tighter bounds and know what the worst case is a bit better. So that's the other big one. There's one more small EIP, which just is kind of a setup for another big EIP that will come at some point in the future. But it just makes contracts that start with a certain byte invalid after the hard fork, so that we can reserve that byte for like special contracts that'll come in the future. So it's just a way to kind of reserve that space. And then there's the difficulty bomb delay, which is the last one.
Okay, cool. I appreciate you going through all that.
I'll share this again in Discord, and basically the spec for London. We should have a blog post on the Ethereum Foundation this week that basically gives kind of the details. But this is the spec that we've been using for development.
Before we move off of that, I do have people asking, can you clarify the timeline for that, for specifically London?
Yes. So London is going to go live on the first testnet next week. It'll go live on Ropsten, which is the proof of work testnet, June 24th. June 14th was yesterday. Then the 2 weeks after that, we're going to have another testnet every week. So Gordy will be June 30th. Rinkeby will be July 7th. Because 1559 is such of a big change, we want to wait and see the first testnet at least fork successfully before we set a mainnet block. We just want to make sure there's no issues, because if we set a mainnet block in advance and we change it, you risk some miners have already updated, to fork mainnet on block X, but then we say, oh, actually, we want an extra 2 weeks, and then we change it to block Y, and then you get kind of like a double fork on mainnet. So we want to avoid that. So once we've seen, at least Ropsten fork successfully, we'll set a block for mainnet. Assuming everything went well, like that we don't like have a bug when we go on the testnets, which, I don't think we should have. We are probably looking at late July to mid-August for a mainnet fork. But again, we'll know that better in about 2-3 weeks.
So actually on that note, is the difficulty bomb going to go off actually, if we're talking possibly as late as mid-August?
Last time I checked, I think we should be good, and if it went off, it would be like the first kind of section where it would not be very noticeable. But I think we should be good. Mid-September would probably be too late though. So like mid-September we would surely see, probably not massive delays, but like it would start to be noticeable in the block time.
Okay.
It's hard to estimate, I guess, as you all probably know, the difficulty bomb just based on like when there's new hash rate that comes in and whatnot. Like it's a bit of a tricky one to estimate. So the estimates we tend to look at try to be too conservative. So we don't want to be like surprised by it showing up early. We definitely have kind of a limit on how far we can push this back. Like we can't wait to September or October, for sure.
Okay.
Speaking of, you said something about hash rate. The network hash rate has dropped since the May 20th high, about 67,000 gigahash. And I was wondering what the thoughts are on that. Just people switching off machines, maybe some machines being turned off because they're in certain countries that aren't allowed mining. I guess it could be a number of variables, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I have thoughts, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert on the topic, right? Like, I think your hypotheses are like, what I would have come up with. Like, I think obviously like the ETH USD price is like a massive, a massive factor on this. I think the gas fees is another one. So you combine those two at the same time, there's kind of a drop at the same time. I think I'm not sure of like the mining distribution in China and how much the like recent China news has affected Ethereum relative to Bitcoin. And I think, with 1559, which will obviously reduce miner income somewhat, and the merge coming up late this year, early next year, maybe for some people it just makes sense to like stop mining or to, I don't have like a very good picture. It's all like pure speculation. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, on that one, why don't you lead, Vega? Why don't you go straight into the merge questions that we had?
Well, I was wondering, what is the merge and what it is not? If you could kind of break facts from fiction.
Yeah. So the roadmap has changed a lot in like the past year. So it's worth kind of clarifying, and maybe taking a step back, I'll walk through like what the original roadmap was, how it changed, and where we're at right now. Because I feel like people are still very anchored on the kind of original roadmap. We had like phase 0, phase 1, phase 2. First, the first iteration of this roadmap was like Ethereum 2 would be phase 0, which is the beacon chain, which we did. So the beacon chain is live. It's been live since December of last year. It runs on mainnet. I think last time I checked, it's about $10 billion of ETH staked, which is roughly 100,000 individual validators. So it's, phase 0 is like checked. Then in the original vision, phase 1 was that we would introduce sharding just for data. So basically that we would have the beacon chain manage these shards, which would act kind of like as hard drives to store data. And the original spec, I think, had 1,000 of them. Then it was lowered to 64 to reduce the communication overhead. But that was kind of the idea. And then once we had that rolled out, we would turn these shards from kind of data or hard drives into computation. So these shards would just run the EVM, right? And you're kind of gradually adding more complexity. One thing that happened kind of over the past year is there's been a lot of progress on rollups as an alternative to sharding for scaling computation. So rollups are basically a mechanism by which you can deposit funds on the main Ethereum network, get them credited in a rollup where you can execute, any transaction on the EVM, and then you can withdraw your funds in a trustless way. And this is kind of the nice, new property that rollups introduced, is that any, they call them validators, but they're, they call them operators, but you can think of them as like validators or administrators of the system. One administrator can censor your withdrawal if you want, but it's permissionless who can join as an administrator. So if there was a rollup that had a bunch of funds in it and the current operators were malicious, somebody new could come in and just say, hey, I can help you withdraw your funds. And this is kind of one of the pretty nice trust properties of rollups, and why it's gained so much prominence in the ecosystem relative to like side chains, where if the validators on the side chains decide they want to steal your funds, there's not really anything you can do because they own the side chain. So rollups kind of became this much more promising way to scale computation on Ethereum. And it's also kind of less of a top-down approach where different rollups can be optimized for different things. So you can have rollups that are more optimized for DeFi, some that are optimized for privacy, some that are optimized for NFTs. And that just creates kind of an ecosystem there where different teams can take on the problems that they want. And the other thing about rollups is they produce a lot of data. And right now they store this data directly on Ethereum, on the Ethereum blockchain. But if we had shards, they could actually, benefit from that. And so the roadmap kind of shifted at that point to saying, well, look, instead of adding the EVM into the shards, which was always the most complicated bit of the roadmap, we'll just leave the shards as this kind of data storage mechanism. We'll have the rollups be the way by which we scale computation, and rollups can use shards for cheap storage. And that also kind of meant that sharding went from a must-have, like kind of the basis that we would need to scale the EVM, to a nice-to-have, because now it's just kind of a cost-saving technology for rollups. In parallel to that, Ethereum was kind of growing in popularity, and one other big concern is now that there's all these applications on chain, how do you do this transition with like the least disruption possible, right? Because we can't afford to break DeFi or to have everybody like withdraw all their funds from all of DeFi and start again on a new chain. And this is kind of what the original roadmap implied. So there was more and more kind of research about, how could you have like a really smooth merge? And then the first iteration of we'll just have one shard with the EVM, and that'll basically be the Ethereum that's today. And then, we'll have 64 other shards, which are just data. And we'll have, that EVM shard, which is Ethereum, and, data shards for rollups. And after that, kind of the next logical simplification was, well, Ethereum clients are already built to work with different consensus algorithms, right? On the current Ethereum testnets like Gordy and Rinkeby and Kovan, they don't run proof of work, they run proof of authority. There's already a ton of private networks built on Ethereum that run different proof of authority networks. So these clients have like this concept of a consensus mechanism that's separate from the actual EVM that runs the thing. And on mainnet, it's obviously proof of work, but on other networks, it's not, and the clients run just fine. So an engineer, researcher, basically came up with a design that treated the merge, instead of having the EVM be just like a shard and having the beacon chain separate, to say, why don't we just use the beacon chain as the new consensus mechanism? And this way we can keep the current clients that we have today. We can keep Geth, we can keep, Besu, Nethermind, and we can just have this switch within them that says, at this point, instead of following proof of work, you follow proof of stake. And this is kind of where the roadmap is at today. So it allows us to like really simplify the amount of engineering that's needed to get to proof of stake. It also allows us to really limit or separate concerns, right? Where we can say, let's first just get the transition done to proof of stake. Once that's done, it's running and solid. Then we can activate withdrawals from the beacon chain. Once that's done, we can activate, we can start implementing shards and whatnot. So it's like we don't need everything happening all at once. We can really isolate the changes. And that helps, just test them better, make sure that they're secure. So that's, long story short, that's kind of where we got today. Where we are with regards to just implementing this kind of merged version of the clients is we had a big hackathon about that in May, where we basically built testnets that were functional, where we were able to take the clients from Ethereum 2, so Prism, Nimbus, Lighthouse, and have them run Ethereum 1 clients. So, Geth, Parity, etc. And, basically the beacon chain client will tell the execution client, or like the ETH1 client, produce a block now, and then it'll verify that the block is valid, and then people will just attest to it, and it'll get finalized, and kind of like how the beacon chain produces blocks. So I think we're at a point where the architecture is sound. We've tested that it works, that it can work kind of at scale. Now what we really need to do over the next couple months is kind of the fine tuning of like the 1,000 little engineering details that need to be resolved. And so I guess, just to wrap up on this, I think realistically, we'll probably have the merge very optimistically late this year. And I think more realistically, Q1 of next year is likely when it's going to happen.
Actually, one question. So you were talking about rollups. Can you define that a little bit? Is that basically layer 2?
Yes,
and can you
exactly.
give some examples of them?
The two most common are Arbitrum and Optimism. So they're both live in different stages of beta. So I think Optimism is like in a closed beta, where I believe Synthelix has a chain or has an implementation running on it. Arbitrum has a couple more projects, and they've just like opened more gradually. But yes, when you hear layer 2, this is basically rollups, at least for Ethereum, right? Bitcoin is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Would Polygon Matic be in that as well?
So this becomes a controversial topic. So Polygon is not a rollup, but a sidechain. And so the biggest difference there is it's much cheaper to use Polygon, but you're giving up more trust. So if the validators of Polygon decided to steal your funds, to walk away, you don't really have much recourse, cryptographically, right? Like, you could sue the company and whatnot, but like on chain, you don't have much recourse. Whereas on rollups, this is like this main distinctions. If all of the current operators like colluded, first of all, they cannot steal your fund. The only thing they can do is they can stop you from withdrawing. And then anybody else can spin up a new operator and allow you to withdraw those funds. So it's, people will sometimes bucket them both as layer 2. Sometimes they'll argue it's not a real layer 2 because there's different trust assumptions. But yeah, they're similar, but yeah, with just different trust assumptions.
Okay.
You mentioned a time scale at the end of your closing there. When do you expect the merge to happen?
So I think the
ballpark.
early,
I know you can't give exact.
the earliest I would see this happen is like end of this year, so November, early December. To me, this is like everything goes well and better than expected. I think realistically, Q1 of next year probably makes sense. Yeah, if we found some major bugs, a major issue, then maybe Q2. So if I had to place odds, I would say there's probably a 50% chance in Q4, something like a 75-85% chance in Q1, and the 99% chance in Q2. And over time, obviously, those estimations can get better. Yeah.
One thing, tying onto that one, basically you said it's either the end of November or it's going to be in January. Nothing's going to happen December, beginning of January.
I mean, I would strongly oppose that. I think it's kind of reckless. You don't want people on holiday,
Same thing at my job, web development. Basically, we don't want to roll any updates or anything like that during the holidays that could break, customers' online stores or anything like that. So it'd be the same thing. Because you guys, the changes you guys, that the Ethereum team makes is impacting a lot of people. It's not just miners, guys. It's it's just more for my community. You got the dApps, you got the DeFi space, so much that you have to take into account when you're making changes to the ecosystem.
Yeah. And one thing on that, 100% agree. So this is why I think unless there's an emergency, you would not see a merge between December 15th and January 15th. I don't see any reason why we would schedule it then. With regards to all the applications, infrastructure, 100% agreed. We need to help those people transitions. And so I'm extremely confident this fall we're going to have test nets and stuff like that. So for people to be able to actually see what does this look like? What does a post-merge client look like? For block explorers, for exchanges, for wallets, for dApps to all be able to adapt. This should all happen this fall. Yeah.
I don't know if you could speak to this, and this doesn't have anything to do with any questions we talked about, but with all of these different coins, cryptocurrencies coming out that offer staking, does Ethereum or the Ethereum team feel kind of rushed to try to push out proof of stake or POS because of those other projects, or no?
I don't think so. So I think, look, the biggest differentiation that Ethereum has with all of these other proof of stake is a low barrier to entry, right? Relatively low. It's not extremely low. And to give you an idea, right now it's 32 ETH is the minimum you need to set up as a solo staker. There's about 100,000 distinct validators. Obviously, a lot of those are operated by the similar groups, like staking pools and whatnot. But that's, I think, the second highest blockchain has about 1,000 validators, right? And those could still be operated by the same groups, right? There's nothing telling you that if there's 1,000 validators on Tezos, that 500 of them are not run by the same operation. So I think we took our time with Ethereum because we wanted to maintain this property. That's we want to keep the lowest possible barrier to entry. And the reason for the 32 ETH is basically networking overhead. Because every block you need everybody to kind of, or at least a large subset of people to sign and send their signatures over the network. If we had a lower threshold, say 16 ETH rather than 32, we just could not handle the peer-to-peer traffic. So I think Ethereum has always been committed to find what's the most accessible proof of stake system we can have. If there are technology advances in the future, better cryptography that allows us to do more efficient signature aggregation and whatnot, I'm sure there would be huge appetite to lower the minimum stake even further. But in order to do that, it was way more complicated. There's been proof of stake systems since 2016. I think somebody once said about Ethereum, one of the best things, they could have slapped proof of stake on it in 2017 and call it a day, right? And we didn't. I think we wanted the system to have high decentralization. I think we've achieved it on the Beacon chain. I think for the merge right now, the two main concerns are obviously network security and just a smooth transition for users. And if it takes an extra month or two to get that right, there's no forcing function. There's no undercoined. It's just not something that comes up in any of the conversations. It's really how do we keep this decentralized? How do we it'll be a transition for like everybody, but how do we minimize the pain in that transition? I think those are the two main guiding factors.
Right. Leading from my initial question, let's see if you even answered this. I'm looking at my notes here. So correct me if I'm wrong. So say the merge happens, the ETH1 chain, the proof of work chain, is going to continue to work alongside or in parallel to the proof of stake chain for X amount of time, correct?
So the EVM will work, but proof of stake will be proof of work will be shut down at the merge. So basically, how it would work is we would say, as of this block, we'll probably use difficulty
at a certain block height.
Yeah, I think it'll be difficulty more than block height, but they're kind of equivalent. But like either at this total difficulty or at this block height, instead of getting your next block from the proof of work engine, get it from the beacon chain. And from that point, we don't, there's no kind of concept of proof of work on the chain, right?
So when we're talking about the timing of this, you're saying basically where we kind of say that switch of proof of stake, the merge, that's when proof of work gets turned off.
Exactly. Yeah, and that would be either Q4 this year, Q1 next year. Roughly. Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to ask as far as like predicting and not predicting, but being able to tell how soon it is that in any way linked to Shanghai? Like, for example, if we start seeing EIPs that are changing things to the proof of work, I mean, it's extending longer. And if Shanghai doesn't have any of those changes, then it's going to be closer. Is that kind of the idea?
That's a great question. So I think the merge will be the main focus of what we work on. There are, obviously there's a long list of features that people want to see in Ethereum. I think early this fall, we're going to know, how realistic is it that we fork before the end of the year, right? Like we'll see, do we have testnets up? If so, have we tested them properly and whatnot? I think when we get there, if we see that the merge is not ready for the end of this year, then that gives us a couple months to ship some of these features that people want to see on Ethereum, right? I don't think there'll be like particularly big features, nothing on the scale of 1559. But historically, the features that have come into hard forks have been quite small. Like to give you an idea, on our development team, it was about 10% of our work was spent on hard forks, right? Not like 50%. So I think, if we get to this fall and we see that, it's very unlikely that the merge will happen before the end of this year, then we would have Shanghai before the merge. We'd introduce, some features in the EVM that people want to see. But if we, on the other hand, see that like we can make it with the merge, then everyone is fine delaying those new features to the EVM, 6 months, so that we just have the merge first.
Okay, so it's not specifically in relation, the changes aren't specifically in relation to proof of work, but just if those changes are going to go into the EVM, then we would presume that the merge is delayed a little bit more. And if they aren't, then the merge is coming sooner.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of the opposite. It's like, we'll try to get the merge this year. If we see that's not possible, then we have like this opportunity to, have a hard fork around like, November, December. And we already know, people are already kind of banging at the door for like the new stuff they want to see in the EVM. So we already have like, not a final list, but like a tentative list of stuff that people would want to put in. So I think we should, if we have the time and, it won't, and we know we don't make the kind of deadline for the merge by the end of this year, then I think, there's no reason not to include a couple new features.
Plus, you would need to have something before the end of the year because right now you're
the difficulty bomb.
Exactly, because it's only being delayed until then.
Yeah. And that was, I think, that's a good point. Like usually we delayed the difficulty bomb something like a year and a half. This time we delayed it like roughly 6 months. And the reason for that is we wanted to kind of force ourselves to do one or the other, right? Like it would be easy to, if we delayed, the difficulty bomb for like a year, to just like not do either and whatnot. So people thought there is like a decent chance we get the merge by the end of this year. So we should aim for that. And if we don't, then we'll have another hard fork, but we'll probably push back the difficulty bomb again by a small amount. Like I don't think it'll be a year or anything like that. But again, unless something went terribly wrong, I think this delay that we could have in December would be the last one before the merge. So I suspect we'd push it back to like March or something like that.
Yeah, the original intention of this is one thing other people have gotten confused. The original intention of the difficulty bomb was to push us to push the developers to proof of stake in the first place.
And that took 4 years instead of 4 months or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the other question that I had was, so where can us miners find, how do we measure, I guess, progress? Like being you as a project manager, do you have like certain milestones along the way to say, well, if we're going to make the end of the year, all of these things need to happen. So if we see any of those slip, we'll kind of have an idea, okay, well, it's not going to happen in a year.
That's a good point. So we have merge calls every 2 weeks, and one of my topics we have the next one Thursday. One of the things I want to bring up there is a sort of list for, the proof of work side, like what are all the things we need to get done? Because there's things you need to do on both sides. There's things you need to do on the beacon chain to like get ready. There's less of them. There's more stuff we need to do on like mainnet to get ready. So I'm gonna try and put together a list. Should have it done in like the next month or so. I share updates, on Twitter. I try to share also like longer form kind of blog updates. I'll link those on Twitter. I think there is this Ethereum Discord. I know Max, you're part of it, where there is a channel called Merge. So where that's really if you want to follow kind of the day-to-day, but otherwise, me and Danny Ryan is basically the guy who does the same job as me, but for ETH2. We'll both be putting out updates as this comes up. And one of those I want to put together is like a list of things to do. Hopefully in the next month I get it done. We're all kind of busy with me with London, and then ETH2 is also having a hard fork this summer. So in the next month or so, the work for that should be done, and we're going to be just kind of waiting for it to happen. So we'll have more time to spec these things out.
Before we go, actually ask a few questions about ETH2. Right now, I think basically, I'm obviously, I've been keeping track of that, but the development teams for Shanghai and the merge, they're separate, so they're running in parallel, correct?
So they're the same teams but different people on them, right? So it's like these different, say the Get team, for example, just has different engineers working on it. But yes, and it's kind of what we did also for like Berlin and London. So we worked on London while Berlin was getting wrapped up. So we're kind of able to do that. And also a lot of the merge work is not necessarily related to like the same areas of the code base as EIPs. A lot of stuff is just like how syncing going to work, right? Like right now, the beacon chain syncs one way, proof of work network syncs another way. How do you make the two sync together? Stuff like that, where it's like pretty separated from like stuff like 1559. So it's quite practical to do both in parallel. And if we have Shanghai, then it will be kind of the same thing, right? Like instead of working on stuff like 1559, people will move on to other EVM features, but it doesn't mean that the interactions between the beacon chain and the EVM chain are pretty separated.
So moving into just ETH 2.0, and obviously I know Danny's more responsible for that than you are, but like what is the first step of, because ETH 2.0, I'm guessing is not just here it is, it's a multi-step as well? We hope with the merge we can retire the ETH 2.0 terminology, because at this point it seems to do more harm than good. But the first step was, launching the beacon chain, and that's been done. Second step is this merge. So, not having ETH1 and ETH2 and just having Ethereum. And then the third step after that, there's basically two more things after that that are quite distinct. One is adding sharding. So like we talked about, we'll just do data sharding so that rollups can use this to store a bunch of data. It'll lower the cost of using rollups, and that'll be good. The other big thing we need to solve is the concept of state growth. So right now, one of the big problems with Ethereum is when you put something in this, like you
create a smart contract. You only pay for this once, but you burden the network forever, right? Like every node forever will need to store this. So ideally, if we were to restart Ethereum today, we'd have like probably rent rather than like a one-time payment where you say, look, you want to store a smart contract, fair enough. But you're not going to pay, once to deploy it, you're going to pay every block or something, and this way, if you stop paying, we just take it away, and you stop burdening the network for that, because we can't just like we'd break all the smart contracts by introducing that. We need to come up with just like clever tricks to keep our current model where people, can deploy and pay, but also make sure that over time data that's not accessed doesn't get stored by every node, but that there's a way for people to revive it if they want. So that's like, I'd say this is like a 1 to 2 year away, or like after the merge problem. But it's, to me, like the last big kind of problem we need to fix at Ethereum. After that, if we stop doing stuff for 10 years, we might not be the most cutting edge, but like we could probably just keep going along. So just to recap, phase 0, beacon chain, that was the first part. The merge is the second one, then sharding, and then also just solving this problem of the ever-growing state. I'd say those are like the big roadmap things over the next couple of years.
Great. I think we're kind of coming near the end. Does anybody have any questions from their streams, or on anybody on my stream? Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, let me see. Hey guys in chat, if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. Make sure you tag me and make sure it's not like, I don't know. Don't ask anything we've already asked.
Thanks again for coming on. It's been really good, and a lot of great information. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad. Like it's not easy to like find the best ways to like share this. So I just end up repeating it over and over in different places, and hopefully it reaches most of the community at some point. Yeah.
Well, it was funny because Vitalik did a whole bunch of videos, or did a whole bunch of interviews, and I think he was saying different things in different videos that I think kind of confused some things, even though he wasn't saying anything incorrect. It was just, he was saying something a little bit different in a different way than what people were normally used to hearing. And that's where the confusion came in. So,
and I appreciate that, like, myself, Vitalik even more, but like we spend, we're basically paid, and we spend, our entire week working on this stuff, and like we're able to keep up with it. And, 99% of people's job, 99% of people on Ethereum's jobs is not to like follow the protocol changes, right? Like either you're a miner, you run a dApp, you run infrastructure. So like, I think we can do a better job of communicating those changes. I've been trying to spend a lot of time on that this year, but there's a lot happening, and like it changes quickly. So it's hard to like have a coherent message that we can communicate over and over, because, 6 months later, things have evolved so much.
Yeah. And for those people that don't know, the ETH R&D group on Discord, if you're interested in this kind of information, is a great source of information just to kind of track what's going on, and see a lot of the developers. Like the All Core Devs group is a great group to follow. With everything coming up, any of the 1559 groups are also really good to follow.
Yeah. And I think, and if people want like a bit of a slower pace, right? Like, I think, if you want to see like every single detail, the Discord is the best place. If you want a bit of a slower pace, Ethereum Magicians and ETH Research are where most of like the long form discussion happens on this stuff. So that's another just good place to keep an eye on.
Great. My chat has no questions.
And mine doesn't either, actually.
I don't have any questions that weren't already answered or that I can't answer for you all, so I think we're good to go.
Okay. How about you, Vega?
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. Nope. He was on push to talk, but cannot hear you, Vega. All right. Well,
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
well, thanks again. We can end this I wasn't sure if this was going to go longer than an hour, but I think we stayed pretty organized and on task and got everything we wanted to get answered out there in a timely fashion. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure at the end of your long days, I'm sure you got a lot of long days right now with getting ready for 1559 in London. So thank you so much for being here, Tim, and I really appreciate it. And thank you all,
likewise.
and thank you all for joining in. And you guys all have a good night.
Appreciate it, Tim. I think you can hear me now.
I can hear you now,
Sorry.
yeah.
Did you have your question? Yeah.
The only thing I wanted to say was I like your sleeve. That's it, on your arm.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Cool.
Appreciate
Well,
it.
yeah. Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
And on that, we'll end it. So have a good night, guys.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, I'm gonna wrap up my stream and I'll see you guys later.
All right. See you.
Okay. All right, guys. So that was the interview with Tim Beiko. I'll be sure to watch the whole live stream, and I'll have timestamps and everything down below. Interesting enough, you guys know that dashboard.flashbots.network crashed. It seems like you guys crashed the website, but they have some interesting stats here of how, I guess, MEV is being utilized, how much total miner profit is being 88 million. Wow, is this daily or interesting? Okay, well, anyways. All right. Well, guys, did you guys enjoy that? Was that a good interview or what? Thanks to Max Voltage for setting up that whole interview. And yeah, Son of a Tuck was there, Serpent was there, Max Voltage. And make sure you guys go subscribe to Max Voltage, all right? He's the one who set up this interview, so very good stuff. So, guys, I'm going to close out the stream here, and I'm gonna be just rewatching it, and we're gonna update the. I'll update it with timestamps and all the questions that have been asked. But otherwise, in terms of you guys wondering when proof of work is going to be ending, it's the same information that we basically talked about last week. Okay, so either the end of this year, November, or Q1 of 2022. And they didn't say this December because they don't want to do anything during holidays. So yeah, so hopefully you guys understand that. Okay, my friends, thanks for watching. Thank you all. BTech, no worries. Anonymous Miner, thank you guys. All right, you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys in a video tomorrow. I'll make update videos. I'll try to put all of what we talked about today in a shorter video and give you guys more information there. Okay, peace out, guys. Thanks so much. Hit that like button on the way out. See you later. See you later. Peace, 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 peace.